The bone-chilling sound of a spooked rattlesnake has evoked fear and aggression against this little understood reptile for eons. Welcome to Incredible Idaho. I'm Jack Hemingway. Tonight we begin our show by answering a few vexing questions about rattlesnakes. Why are people so afraid of them? Why do they consider them as demons? And further, why do they kill them at will all the time? Eventually, we hope to build up a better understanding of the Great Basin rattler, a creature that deserves some measure of respect, like any other.
Many people have a deep-seated fear of rattlesnakes, a fear that has reached mythic proportions. These fears have been perpetuated for hundreds of years by literature, even the Bible, and more recently, by Hollywood movies, such as the 1969 Western classic, True Grit. The wanton shooting of rattlesnakes is deeply embedded in our culture. A number of southern states hold rattlesnake roundups every year as a big-time family and tourism event.
Thank goodness for the Sweetwater Rattlesnake Roundup. It increases the people coming into our community. These people, in turn, increase all the retailers' business.
From the time that there's records of man on Earth, man has used animals for his own benefit. And I really feel that we're trying, or at least there's a portion of the people trying to do away with something that is natural and has been natural for millions of years. Again,
slaughter now! Stop the slaughter now!
Rattlesnake roundups have never been held in Idaho, but the notion that the only good rattlesnake is a dead one has ruled for years. Since the white man came to Idaho in the 1800s, it's been common practice for people to shoot rattlesnakes at will. Rick Baker, a native Idahoan, remembers killing snakes as a kid.
I can remember the first time I ran into one, it was kind of like a super shot of adrenaline. Your feet defy gravity and you're in the air and you're shooting or kicking or stoning or clubbing the thing because you're scared to death of it. I don't know where it came from. I think my grandfather used to tell stories about snakes that were huge, as big as your leg, and could eat you, and about an old boy that bought a pair of boots who someone else had worn and who died from a rattlesnake bite, and a piece of the fang was in the heel of the boot, and he wore them and he died. So the age of innocence and my naivete as a kid, boy, I'd see a rattlesnake and it pretty much immediate hunter-killer reaction, get rid of that booger.
That kind of attitude, handed down from generation to generation, is hard to overcome. But it turns out that many people who actually get bitten by rattlesnakes are the same people who try to kill them, or mess around with them in some manner.
Now what we're seeing is young males, slightly intoxicated, that have been handling snakes. They're either out along a drainage ditch or along the river or up in the hills, see a rattlesnake, they chase it, they catch it, they pick it up, or they kill it and they think it's dead, and then when they take a hold of it, it bites them.
Dr. Blackman suggests that the best thing to do is avoid rattlesnakes and you won't get bitten.
And for the most part, the rattlesnakes here are not aggressive rattlesnakes. There's a misperception that we have diamondbacks in Idaho. We don't. And you almost have to step on it before you get bit by it, and it's only purely defensive. These are not aggressive animals.
Vince Cobb, a research wildlife biologist for Idaho State University, wholeheartedly agrees. Cobb has been studying the Great Basin rattlesnake at the Idaho National Engineering Laboratory for the last 5 years. During that time, he's handled over 565 rattlesnakes, and he's never been bitten once.
The rattlesnakes really aren't an aggressive animal at all. That they try to stay hidden, and most of the times when you come up on a rattlesnake, they'll rattle and then just try to escape. Sometimes they'll just stay coiled and hidden in the tuft of grass or under the sagebrush or under a rock, wherever they are, in hopes that you'll just pass right by.
In the course of his research, Cobb has discovered a number of interesting things about rattlesnakes. For instance, he has found that female rattlesnakes give birth only once every 3 years. And that's if conditions are just perfect.
If someone comes in and eradicates many individuals from this den, and they happen to be a large number of females that were, say, pregnant that were killed, then you could imagine the effect that could have on the population, especially if you have several years of this.
In other states, Cobb says that whole rattlesnake dens have been wiped out with dynamite or gasoline fires. This could have an impact on the overall ecosystem and food chain.
All animals seem to serve a good purpose, and the snakes are a very important one. They're a top carnivore. They primarily, the rattlesnakes anyway, primarily feed on small mammals. And you know, I could imagine if you eradicated a lot of snakes from a specific area that had a good number of small mammals, then the population of the small mammals could increase.
So as Vince Cobb suggests, the Great Basin rattlesnake plays an important role in the balance of nature, and that's why people like Cobb ask people to think twice about shooting rattlesnakes at will. After realizing that Great Basin rattlesnakes are more passive than aggressive, Rick Baker doesn't shoot them anymore.
Well, I started hanging around some environmentalists. It began to make me realize that just because it was crawling or walking on the ground, I didn't need to be shooting at it. It was a good lesson. Really, the rattlesnake, there's nothing to really be afraid of unless you're right on top of him and he's going to bite you. Even then, I've seen times where I've been just inches away from a snake and the snake's coiled and ready to go, and all you got to do is sidestep and you're out of their way.
If you do somehow get bitten by a rattlesnake, Dr. Blackman has the following advice.
What you need to do when you're bitten by a rattlesnake is to first of all get away from the snake, because it can bite a second time. Don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out what kind of a snake it was. Basically, you immobilize the arm right below the heart and you head for a medical facility, because it's a matter of minutes to hours when you get sick, and you get very sick. And you get very nauseated, and you get shocky and a lot of swelling and so forth, and you really become quite ill. So it's important that once you're sure that you've sustained a rattlesnake bite, that you go where you can get some assistance.
In some cases, a rattlesnake bite can be harmless if the snake fails to release venom when it strikes. Dr. Blackman says it will be obvious if any venom has been released.
So you need to look at the wound and see what's happening. If it doesn't swell, if within an hour's time after you think you've been bitten, there's no swelling, there's no bleeding around the openings, there's a very good chance you haven't been bitten. You can sit tight.
In rare cases, if someone gets bitten by a rattlesnake and fails to seek immediate medical treatment, they could die. But this is extremely rare. Out of 45,000 snakebite cases nationwide each year, only 10 to 12 cause death.
I can hear one. You hear that one? It's over here just beyond these rocks, it sounds like. So watch your step here.
After studying the Great Basin rattlesnake for 5 years, Vince Cobb has a newfound respect for this most despised reptile.
It's very exciting to run up on rattlesnakes in the wild. It gives you a real adrenaline rush. They're nothing to fear like people think they are. They're not trying to attack. They're not trying to bite you. You know, if you get an animal cornered, it is going to attack and it is going to bite you. And that's true for most animals. Mm-hmm. And it's also going to be true for rattlesnakes. But if if you see a rattlesnake and you just walk on by it, it's going to go its own way and you can go yours.
Anyone who shoots rattlesnakes must have a valid Idaho hunting license. There is no bag or possession limit on rattlesnakes in Idaho.
Tonight, we're going to visit a positive story about salmon. A rare case where a group of ranchers and agency officials have worked together to improve survival conditions for salmon in the Lemhi River. It's called the Lemhi Model Watershed Project, a cooperative venture that involves ranchers, fisheries biologists, soil conservationists, and a number of state and federal agencies. The program began in 1989, well before salmon were protected under the Endangered Species Act, because these folks wanted to do something active to protect the salmon.
Tell you the truth, first time I thought anything about any of this, I was over here haying one day and I got to thinking about my dad liking to catch fish. It was a year after he died, and thought it was a shame there weren't any fish. Like I say, I'm not much of a fisherman, but I'd like to see them there. If my kids wanted to fish, I'd like to have them have the opportunity, but there's no opportunity now.
As many of you know, the once legendary salmon runs that used to choke Idaho's rivers during the summertime are plunging toward extinction. Historically, the Lemhi River was a very productive spawning area for salmon. Anglers used to catch these impressive lunkers by the dozens. At one time, over 1,700 pairs of Chinook salmon spawned in the Lemhi River in the early 1960s. Last year, however, only 23 pairs spawned in the stream, and this summer, the Lemhi run may be reduced to single digits. Most people agree that 8 dams on the Snake and Columbia rivers are responsible for wiping out the salmon.
Those dams are responsible for about 95% of all the man-caused mortality on Snake River salmon. There's so much money involved here. There's so many utilities and aluminum industries and waterway transportation people and corporate irrigators that are making billions off of the use of the Columbia and Snake Rivers and at the expense of the fish. And they basically have taken the federal agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bonneville Power Administration, taken them hostage. And you can't tell the difference now.
But even so, ranchers have decided to do their part to improve salmon habitat on the Lemhi River because they want the salmon back.
Heck, I used to come down here and chase fish all the time. I mean, salmon was part of our big deal when we was kids. We used to come down this big pool here, them fat salmon would lodge in here, and man, we'd ride them and chase them and do all kinds of fun stuff.
One of the most important aspects of the Model Watershed Project is called the fish flush. From the top of the Lemhi Basin to the Salmon River confluence, ranchers are adjusting their irrigation practices to ensure that a minimum flow remains in the river for salmon, both juvenile fish and adults. In the past, particularly in dry years, irrigation dried up the river, and the salmon had nowhere to go. The new system works like this. Ranchers in the high reaches of the basin start diverting water into their pastures in March to saturate the valley floor and raise the water table. As time goes on, ranchers further down the valley also divert water into their pastures and raise the water table. Once the valley is fully saturated, the water table rises, and so does the flow of the Lemhi River, and then there's enough water for the fish to migrate in and out of the basin.
Most of this water is coming from recharge, from irrigation water being put on the ground up above the valley here, and it fills the whole aquifer on the Lemhi, and you have this kind of recharge that'll get back to the river, and this is what keeps our river full all summer long.
To make the program work, ranchers have to turn off their irrigation diversions every several days to keep water in the Lemhi for salmon.
25 and 41.
The water master keeps a close watch on irrigation diversions to make sure the water is available. But none of the ranchers say it's a big sacrifice.
Of course, you kind of take a little bit more thought at what flow is in the river and try to either start your water early or stagger everybody to turn on. Now everybody's trying to get turned on in April and earlier and staggering it to where there's water is on, instead of everybody just turning on in one day and drying the river plumb up.
Coming up next, more on saving the salmon in the Lemhi. A second keystone to the Lemhi Model Watershed Program is the screening of irrigation ditches to prevent salmon from swimming into cow pastures. The screening program started in the late 1950s, but the old screens were not very efficient. The new screens are very high-tech and very expensive. They cost several $1,000s to build and install, but they're 99% efficient in saving fish.
This is a new fish screen on a tributary to the Lemhi River. It's replacing an old screen where we reduce the approach velocities to no more than 0.4 of a foot per second. We have a bypass pipe on the left-hand side to funnel the young fish, the salmon, steelhead, as they're coming down the ditch here, and they can't physically go down the ditch because of the screen, and it puts them into a bypass pipe and passively moves them back to the river.
The fish screens are built from scratch by Idaho Fish and Game Department personnel in salmon. It's a big job. Nearly 30 department employees work on building and installing fish screens in the upper Salmon River Basin. They build about 40 of them per year. In the Lemhi Basin, 75% of the irrigation diversions are screened. And in the whole Salmon River Basin, 77% of the diversions are screened. It's an expensive program with a budget in excess of $3 million. But at this point, when the fish runs are severely depressed, every fish counts.
The older style screens, and there have been few evaluations done, but up to 85% of fry lost at the old perpendicular style drum screens.
Beyond the fish screening effort and water management, there's a lot of other work going on in the Lemhi Basin to save salmon.
It's still an average depth.
A crew of fish biologists recently conducted an inventory of the Lemhi River to evaluate fish habitat.
We're trying to quantify the habitat components of the stream, like pools and riffles and runs. This will help us identify the amount and frequency of different habitats that the salmon and other resident fish and steelhead also will use.
Once the inventory is complete, a number of habitat improvement projects will be identified and funding will be sought to enhance the fish habitat of the Lemhi. How ranchers manage their livestock has a direct bearing on fish habitat and salmon production on the Lemhi. At the expansive Powers Ranch, where many of the salmon spawn, the family has taken great pride in protecting the riparian habitat along the stream. A key to their success is the use of federal grazing allotments. In early May, they drive their cattle into high country, and all summer long, the river bottom is rested from grazing.
Well, I think right now with the issues that are at hand, we all have to do the best job we can. And we all are concerned about the fish and just doing the general management of our grasses and our fields. I mean, if we can't let this kind of stuff deteriorate because it doesn't do anything but hurt us.
90% of the fish habitat is on private ground. So we need to take care of that. And the only way to do that is to be able to turn out on the public lands.
All of these folks working together to improve salmon survival in the Lemhi are proud of their efforts. Ralph Swift, a soil conservationist, is the project leader. He's the glue that holds the whole project together.
The key is cooperation between all the agencies and the private landowners and education.
What we're seeing on the Lemhi is the beginning of a real grassroots effort. That's the people who actually live off the grass, the livestock operators. But they're also beginning to form, in my view, perhaps most importantly, political force on the ground level to work against those federal agencies that are trying to kill all these fish off.
What are you guys doing?
Huh?
What are you doing?
Several teachers at Income Elementary School are trying to create a special learning environment for their students. They're building a thriving nature center in an old irrigation ditch right behind the school.
Well, the original idea stemmed from the fact that we believe that our kids can learn from the environment by being in the environment rather than by studying books. And to be able to interact with the plant life and the animal life and the weather and all the other different aspects of the environment, rather than have them sit in the classroom and tell them, well, out there is a great place, they can be out here exploring and learn what a great place it is right from being in it. You guys can start digging right here.
Elizabeth Butler, a 6th grade teacher, and Paul Lish, a kindergarten teacher and Income's mayor, worked together to solicit grant funding from the Idaho Department of Fish and Game and U.S. West to create the Nature Center. School kids have been planting trees, cleaning up garbage, hanging bird houses and bat houses, collecting flowers, and all kinds of fun stuff.
Well, I think that the 5th and 6th graders understand a little bit more the dynamics of the area, you know, and that they need to do something. And the younger kids, they're just happy to be out in the dirt, you know, and we're kind of educating them too that it's just not another play area, but it's a learning area, a place they can go. And I think that's real important to just get kids just looking at anything, just get the curiosity about nature. Just makes them more curious about something else.
I think it's a good idea because the animals and everything need a place to live as well as everybody else.